Have you ever looked around your life and wondered why some people seem to rise higher every single year while others stay stuck in the exact same place? It's easy to believe the difference is talent. It's easy to think some people were simply born with confidence, opportunity, or luck. But what if the biggest factor isn't any of those things? What if the direction of your life is quietly being decided by the conversations you have every day, the attitudes you tolerate, the people whose voices you hear the most? Take a moment and think about the last 5 people you spent the most time with. Not your favorite celebrities, not the successful people you follow online. The real people, the ones who call you, the ones you eat lunch with, the ones you text late at night, the ones whose opinions somehow matter more than they should. Now ask yourself one question. Are these people pulling you toward the life you dream about, or gently convincing you to settle for less? Because influence doesn't always arrive with a loud voice. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it looks like comfort. Sometimes it sounds like, why work so hard? You're already doing enough. Nobody becomes successful anyway. Just relax. One sentence doesn't seem dangerous, but hear it every week for 5 years, and it becomes your reality. Human beings are incredibly adaptable. We absorb the habits, language, expectations, and standards of the people around us without even realizing it. Imagine placing a white shirt beside something that's constantly leaking blue dye. The shirt doesn't turn blue in a single second. It changes little by little, day after day, drop after drop. That's exactly how influence works. Most people don't destroy your dreams overnight. They slowly lower your standards until your dreams no longer seem possible. There was a young man who desperately wanted to become an entrepreneur. Every morning, he woke up excited. He listened to podcasts. He read books. He wrote business ideas in notebooks filled with ambition. But every evening, he met the same group of friends. Friends he'd known since high school. Whenever he shared an idea, someone laughed. That's risky. You'll lose everything. Rich people are just lucky. You should be grateful for what you already have. At first, he argued. Then he explained. Eventually, he stopped talking about his dreams altogether. Nothing dramatic happened. No huge fight. No betrayal. No unforgettable moment. Just thousands of tiny moments that slowly convinced him to think smaller. Years later, he wasn't broke. He wasn't miserable. But he was living a life that felt borrowed. Every morning, he wondered what would have happened if he had protected his ambition instead of protecting everyone's comfort. That's the tragedy most people never notice. Failure isn't always falling. Sometimes failure is quietly becoming someone you never intended to be. Now think about a garden. If you plant roses but allow weeds to grow everywhere, eventually the weeds steal the sunlight, the water, and the nutrients. The roses never reach their potential. Not because roses are weak, but because the environment wasn't protected. Your mind works the same way. Your goals are the roses. Negative influence is the weeds. And every conversation is either watering your future or feeding your excuses. Here's something uncomfortable. The people closest to you often aren't trying to hurt you. They're trying to keep you familiar. People naturally defend the lifestyle they understand. If they've never built a business, they'll tell you business is impossible. If they've never become healthy, they'll tell you diets don't work. If they've never chased a dream, they'll warn you about every possible risk. Not because they're evil, because uncertainty scares them. And when people are afraid, they often hand that fear to someone else. Imagine standing at the edge of a mountain. You see an incredible view waiting beyond the climb. But everyone behind you keeps saying, it's too dangerous. What if you fail? Nobody makes it. Eventually, you stop looking at the mountain. You start looking back at the crowd. That's how dreams disappear. Not because the mountain moved, but because your attention did. The truth is, your future is being shaped by the conversations you repeatedly accept. Confidence is contagious. So is fear. Discipline spreads. So does laziness. Optimism grows. So does negativity. Every room has a temperature. Stay there long enough, and eventually your mindset adjusts without permission. Think about athletes preparing for a championship. They don't spend every night surrounded by people mocking discipline. They train with people who expect greatness. Entrepreneurs gather with entrepreneurs. Artists learn from artists. Great musicians practice with musicians who challenge them. Not because they're better than everyone else, but because environment accelerates identity. The people around you silently vote on the person you're becoming. Every joke, every opinion, every expectation, every reaction, they're casting votes. And over time, Those votes begin shaping the way you see yourself. That's why choosing your environment isn't selfish. It's survival. Because if you don't intentionally choose the voices guiding your life, someone else will. Think back to when you were a child. You weren't born believing you were capable or incapable. You weren't born thinking success belonged to someone else. Those beliefs were built. One sentence at a time. One experience at a time. One voice at a time. Some people were fortunate enough to grow up hearing words like, "You can figure it out. I believe in you. Keep trying. Don't be afraid to fail." Those words became invisible bricks, building confidence from the inside out. Others grew up hearing something very different. Be realistic. Don't get your hopes up. People like us don't do things like that. Why can't you just be satisfied? At first, they're only words. But over time, words become beliefs. Beliefs become decisions. And decisions become a life. That's why the people closest to you matter so much. Their words don't simply enter your ears. They slowly become the soundtrack playing inside your own mind. And here's the dangerous part. Eventually, you stop hearing their voice. Because it becomes your voice. You begin doubting yourself before anyone else gets the chance. You reject opportunities before they're even offered. You talk yourself out of dreams without realizing whose language you're using. It's almost as if someone quietly handed you a pair of glasses years ago. You forgot you were wearing them. Now every opportunity looks smaller. Every obstacle looks larger. Every dream feels unrealistic. The world didn't change. The lens did. Imagine two seeds planted on the exact same day. One is placed in rich soil, watered consistently, surrounded by sunlight. The other is dropped onto dry, rocky ground where almost nothing can grow. Neither seed chose its environment. Yet after months pass, one becomes a towering tree while the other struggles to survive. Would anyone blame the second seed? Probably not. They would immediately recognize that environment matters. Yet when it comes to our own lives, we often ignore that same truth. We blame ourselves for not growing, while remaining planted in places that slowly drain our confidence. Maybe you've experienced it before. You leave a conversation feeling strangely exhausted. Nobody insulted you. Nobody yelled. But somehow your energy disappeared. Every idea you mentioned was questioned. Every goal was met with skepticism. Every possibility was followed by a reason it couldn't work. You walked in hopeful. You walked out uncertain. That's what constant negativity does. It rarely attacks your dream directly. Instead, it quietly steals your momentum. Now think about the opposite. Have you ever met someone who made you believe more in yourself after just one conversation? Someone who listened carefully instead of waiting to criticize. Someone who asked bigger questions. Someone who challenged your excuses without attacking your character. You left feeling lighter, more focused, more determined. Those people are rare. But when you find them, they become mirrors reflecting back a stronger version of yourself. The truth is, everyone transfers something. Some people transfer fear. Others transfer courage. Some transfer excuses. Others transfer discipline. The question isn't whether you're being influenced. The question is, by whom? Consider a campfire. Place one glowing piece of wood beside the flames, and it burns brighter. Take that same piece of wood away from the fire and leave it alone. Slowly, almost silently, the glow begins to fade. No dramatic event. No explosion. Just a gradual loss of heat. People are remarkably similar. Motivation is difficult to maintain in complete isolation. That's why surrounding yourself with people who are growing isn't about depending on them. It's about protecting the fire inside you until it becomes strong enough to withstand the wind. Many people misunderstand this idea. They believe changing their circle means abandoning everyone they've ever known. That's not the lesson. Loyalty matters. Kindness matters. Family matters. But proximity matters too. You can love someone deeply without allowing their limitations to define your future. You can respect someone's journey without making it your destination. Sometimes the healthiest decision isn't to cut people off. It's simply to stop asking advice from people who have never gone where you're trying to go. If you're climbing a mountain, you don't ask someone standing comfortably in the valley which path reaches the summit. Not because they're unintelligent, because they haven't walked the trail. The same is true in life. If you want financial freedom, learn from people who understand money. If you want peace, spend time with people who carry peace into every room. If you want discipline, watch those who consistently keep promises to themselves. Success leaves clues. So does failure. The people around you are constantly teaching you something, even when they don't realize it. every habit they repeat, every standard they accept, every excuse they normalize. It's all shaping the invisible boundaries of what you believe is possible. And once you begin noticing those invisible influences, you can never see your relationships the same way again. There's a question that almost nobody asks themselves. Not because it's difficult, because it's uncomfortable. The question is this: who am I becoming because of the people around me? Notice the wording. Not who do I want to become, not who used to be, but who am I becoming right now? Because every single day, your identity is being shaped in ways you can't always see. Imagine standing on an airport moving walkway. At first, it barely feels like you're moving. You glance around. Everything seems normal. You're still the same person. But after several minutes, you realize you've traveled a long distance without taking many steps yourself. Relationships work the same way. Every day spent around the same attitudes, the same conversations, and the same habits slowly carries you in a direction. The scary part? You often don't notice the direction until years have passed. That's why some people wake up at 40 or 50 years old and wonder where their ambition went. They didn't lose it in one moment. It drifted away. One ordinary day after another. One compromise after another. One comfortable excuse after another. Life rarely changes because of one massive decision. It changes because of thousands of tiny influences repeated over time. Think about water dripping onto a rock. One drop accomplishes almost nothing, but millions of drops can carve stone. Words are like those drops. So are attitudes. So are expectations. If every day someone tells you that your dream is unrealistic, eventually that message starts wearing away your confidence. Not all at once, little by little, until one day you stop dreaming. Not because you failed, but because you stopped believing. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine hearing every day, "You've got this. Keep going. You're improving. Don't quit now." Those words don't magically solve your problems, but they strengthen your resolve. They remind you that progress is still possible. Sometimes that's all a person needs to keep moving. Have you ever noticed how differently people react to the exact same situation? Two co-workers lose their jobs on the same afternoon. One goes home saying, "My life is over." The other says, "Maybe this is the opportunity I've been waiting for." Same event, different mindset. Where does that mindset come from? Part of it comes from experience, but much of it comes from the voices they've been surrounded by for years. One learned to expect defeat. The other learned to search for opportunity. Neither response appeared overnight. Both were built over time. That's why your circle doesn't just affect your actions. It affects your interpretation of reality. One group sees obstacles. Another sees possibilities. One group complains about circumstances. Another asks, "What's the next move?" One waits for permission. The other creates momentum. And eventually, those different perspectives produce completely different lives. Picture two travelers setting out across a desert. Both carry the same amount of water. Both face the same scorching sun. Both walk the same distance. But one constantly repeats, "I'll never make it." Every step feels heavier. Every mile feels impossible. The other keeps saying, "One more step." That's it. Not 10 miles. Not the entire journey. Just one more step. Eventually, they reach different destinations. Not because one had easier conditions, but because one protected their mindset. Your environment either reinforces that mindset or slowly tears it apart. Now here's something even more powerful. The 5 people you spend the most time with don't just influence your thoughts. They influence your standards. And standards quietly determine your future. If everyone around you arrives late, eventually being late feels normal. If everyone around you complains about work, complaining becomes part of your daily routine. If everyone around you gives up whenever life becomes difficult, perseverance starts feeling unusual. But place yourself around people who honor their commitments. People who show up early. People who keep learning. People who refuse to blame everyone else. Suddenly, excellence doesn't seem extraordinary anymore. It becomes the standard. And when your standards rise, your decisions rise with them. Here's an image you'll never forget. Imagine an eagle raised among chickens. Every morning, it watches chickens scratch the ground. Every afternoon, it watches chickens flutter only a few feet into the air. Every evening, it returns to the same small fence. Eventually, the eagle begins believing that's all life is. Not because it lacks wings, because it has never seen what those wings were made for. One day, another eagle flies overhead, high above the clouds. effortlessly. For the first time, the young eagle looks up instead of down. Something inside it awakens. It realizes the limitation was never its ability. It was its environment. Many people spend years living like that eagle. They've accepted ceilings that don't actually exist. Not because they're incapable, but because nobody around them has shown them another possibility. Sometimes all it takes is one conversation with the right person, one mentor, one coach, one friend who refuses to let you settle, and suddenly you begin to imagine a life you had stopped believing was possible. That's the incredible power of the people you allow close enough to shape your thinking. Because before your life changes, your vision of what's possible has to change first. There's a reason airports have control towers. From thousands of feet in the air, pilots can only see so much. The control tower sees the bigger picture. It sees weather patterns. It sees other aircraft. It sees obstacles the pilot cannot. Now imagine trying to fly through a storm while refusing to listen to the tower. Sooner or later, you're going to lose your way. Life is no different. Every one of us needs people who can see what we cannot. People who aren't impressed by our excuses. People who care enough to tell us the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Real friends don't just celebrate your victories. They protect your future. Sometimes that means saying, you're capable of more. Sometimes it means asking, why are you settling? And sometimes it means standing beside you during seasons when you can't even believe in yourself. Those are the people worth keeping close. Because encouragement isn't always loud. Sometimes encouragement is simply someone refusing to let you quit. Think about the greatest athletes in the world. No matter how talented they become, they still have coaches. Not because they don't know how to play, because someone outside the game can see what they cannot. A coach notices small mistakes before they become permanent habits. A coach pushes when the athlete wants to stop. A coach reminds them of the goal when emotions begin to cloud their focus. Now ask yourself, who in your life plays that role? Who tells you the truth instead of just telling you what you want to hear? Who challenges you to become stronger instead of helping you stay comfortable? If nobody comes to mind, perhaps that isn't a criticism. Perhaps it's an invitation. An invitation to intentionally seek people who stretch your thinking. Growth rarely happens inside an echo chamber. If every person around you agrees with every decision you make, something is missing. Sometimes the greatest gift another person can give you is a different perspective. Not to discourage you, to sharpen you. Iron sharpens iron. But iron never becomes sharper by lying next to cotton. Pressure creates strength. Constructive criticism creates wisdom. Honest conversations create maturity. Many people avoid relationships like that because they mistake correction for rejection. They're not the same. Someone who truly believes in you will sometimes confront you, not to make you feel small, but because they refuse to let you stay small. Imagine a sculptor standing before a massive block of marble. To everyone else, it's just a heavy stone. But the sculptor already sees the masterpiece hidden inside. Every strike of the hammer removes something unnecessary. If the marble could speak, it might complain. This hurts. Why are you breaking pieces off of me? Leave me alone. But the sculptor isn't destroying the statue. He's revealing it. The right people do something similar. They don't add greatness to your life. They help remove the habits, fears, and excuses hiding the greatness that was already there. That's why your circle should include people who inspire you. But it should also include people who challenge you. Someone who asks difficult questions. Someone who notices when you're drifting away from your goals. Someone who celebrates your progress but refuses to let you become satisfied with mediocrity. Those relationships are priceless. Unfortunately, many people choose friendships based on convenience rather than character. Convenience feels easy. Character changes lives. Convenience says, let's waste another evening. Character says, what are you building? Convenience says, skip it this time. Character says, you made a commitment. Convenience says, maybe tomorrow. Character says, start today. Those conversations may only last a few minutes, but they shape years of your life. Here's something else to consider. Not every influential person is physically close to you. Years ago, your circle was mostly limited to family, neighbors, co-workers, and classmates. Today, that's no longer true. Every podcast you listen to, every audiobook you finish, every interview you watch, every book you read, every mentor whose wisdom you study, they're entering your mind. They're becoming part of your environment. Think about that for a moment. You may not have successful entrepreneurs living next door. You may not personally know world-class athletes. You may never sit down for coffee with the people you admire most, but you can still spend time with their ideas every single day. Their books become conversations. Their experiences become lessons. Their mistakes become shortcuts for your own journey. That's one of the greatest opportunities of our generation. You can intentionally choose whose voice becomes familiar. Instead of filling every spare moment with noise, you can fill it with wisdom. Imagine driving 1 hour to work each day. That's 2 hours of listening. 2 hours every day. 10 hours every week. More than 500 hours every year. Imagine replacing random distractions with ideas that strengthen your mindset, improve your discipline, and expand your vision. Year after year, those hours compound. Just like money grows through consistent investment, your thinking grows through consistent exposure to the right voices. Most transformations don't begin with dramatic moments. They begin quietly. A different book, a better conversation, a new mentor, a healthier environment. At first, almost nobody notices. But over time, those small changes begin creating an entirely different person. Have you ever noticed how quickly habits spread? Walk into an office where everyone complains, and before long, even the most positive employee begins joining in. Sit at a dinner table where everyone spends the entire evening talking about problems, and eventually you stop looking for solutions. Spend enough time around people who constantly settle for good enough, and excellence starts feeling unnecessary. That's the hidden power of a group. You don't have to agree with everything they say. You only have to hear it often enough. Repetition is persuasive. The human mind begins to accept as normal whatever it experiences consistently. That's why people often mistake familiarity for truth. If you've heard something 1,000 times, it feels right, even if it isn't. Think about a thermostat. A thermostat doesn't create the temperature. It simply adjusts to the environment around it. Most people live like thermostats. They walk into a room full of negativity and become negative. They enter a workplace filled with gossip and begin gossiping. They spend time with people who expect little from life, and slowly their own expectations shrink. Without realizing it, they stop leading their environment and start reflecting it. But the people who leave a lasting impact on the world are different. They're more like thermostats that have been replaced with furnaces. Instead of absorbing the atmosphere, they create it. Their optimism isn't dependent on circumstances. Their discipline isn't dependent on how everyone else feels. Their integrity doesn't disappear because the crowd chooses an easier path. Those people are rare. And here's why. It's exhausting to constantly swim against the current. If every person around you is drifting downstream, eventually you'll feel the temptation to let go and drift with them. It feels easier, more comfortable, less lonely. But comfort has a price. Every time you trade growth for comfort, you pay with a piece of your future. Not immediately, not all at once, but little by little. Imagine you're climbing a staircase carrying a backpack. At first, it's light. Then someone hands you a small stone. Carry this. It doesn't seem like much. A few minutes later, another stone. Then another. Then another. None of them feel heavy on their own. But after climbing hundreds of steps, the weight becomes overwhelming. Negative influences work exactly like those stones. One cynical comment, one limiting belief, one excuse, one unnecessary distraction. None of them seem powerful by themselves. But over months and years, they accumulate until you begin wondering why everything feels so difficult. The problem isn't always the mountain. Sometimes it's the unnecessary weight you've been carrying. Now imagine setting that backpack down, one stone at a time. Suddenly the climb feels different. The mountain hasn't changed. You have. That's what happens when you begin protecting your environment. You don't magically eliminate every challenge. You simply stop carrying burdens that were never yours to begin with. Here's another truth that's easy to overlook. Energy is contagious. Have you ever spent time with someone who lights up every room they enter? Not because they're the loudest person, not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because they carry genuine enthusiasm. They believe opportunities exist. They notice possibilities instead of problems. They celebrate other people's victories instead of becoming jealous. After spending an hour with them, you feel inspired to take action. You walk away thinking bigger, dreaming bigger, believing bigger. Now compare that to spending an hour with someone who constantly criticizes. Nothing is ever good enough. Every successful person is somehow dishonest. Every opportunity has a hidden catch. Every challenge becomes proof that life is unfair. You leave that conversation mentally exhausted. Your motivation quietly fades. Nothing about your circumstances changed. Only the emotional atmosphere did. That's why protecting your peace is not selfish. It's necessary, because the quality of your inner world determines the quality of your outer life. The people closest to you help shape that inner world every single day. So here's a challenge. For just 1 week, become an observer. Pay attention to every conversation. Notice how you feel after spending time with different people. Ask yourself simple questions. Do I feel stronger after talking with this person? Do I leave inspired or discouraged? Do our conversations revolve around ideas or excuses? Do they remind me of my potential or reinforce my fears? Don't judge anyone. Just notice. Awareness is the beginning of change. Many people spend years trying to change their results without ever examining their environment. They work harder. They read more books. They make bigger goals. Yet every evening they return to the same influences that quietly pull them backward. It's like trying to sail across the ocean while the anchor is still resting on the ocean floor. You can use all your strength. You can raise the sails. You can point the ship toward your destination. But until the anchor is lifted, progress will always be slower than it should be. And sometimes, the anchor isn't failure. Sometimes, the anchor is simply the people whose expectations have become heavier than your dreams. There comes a moment in every person's life when they have to make a difficult decision. Not about where to live. Not about what career to choose. Not even about how much money they want to make. But about who gets a front row seat to their future. Because not everyone who walked with you in one season is meant to walk with you forever. That doesn't make them bad people. It simply means people grow in different directions. Think about a rocket launch. Before the rocket reaches space, it burns through enormous amounts of fuel. Then something fascinating happens. The booster rockets separate. They fall away. Why? Because they failed? No, because they fulfilled their purpose. If those boosters stayed attached forever, they would eventually become dead weight. The rocket would never reach orbit. Life has seasons like that. Some people help you through one chapter. They encourage you when you're young. They stand beside you during difficult times. They teach you valuable lessons. You can appreciate everything they gave you. But appreciation doesn't always require permanent proximity. Growth sometimes asks for new environments, new conversations, new challenges, new perspectives. That's one of the hardest lessons to accept, because we often confuse history with destiny. Just because you've known someone for 10 years doesn't automatically mean they're helping you become the person you're meant to be. Length of friendship and quality of influence are not the same thing. Ask yourself this: if you met the people in your circle today, exactly as they are now, would you intentionally build close relationships with them? Or are you holding on simply because you've always known them? That's not an easy question. But honest questions create honest answers. And honest answers create better lives. Now imagine you're planting an orchard. You don't inspect the trees once and assume they'll stay healthy forever. You check them regularly. You remove dead branches. You protect them from disease. You make sure they're still producing fruit. Relationships deserve the same wisdom. Not because people are disposable, because your future is valuable. Every hour is an investment. Every conversation costs time. And time is the one resource you'll never earn back. You can make more money. You can rebuild a business. You can recover from failure. But you cannot recover yesterday. Once it's gone forever. That's why wise people become intentional about where their time goes. They understand that every yes is also a no. Every hour spent in an unproductive environment is an hour not spent learning, building, serving, or growing. The goal isn't to become isolated. The goal is to become intentional. There's a difference. Some people hear this message and think it means surrounding themselves only with successful millionaires. That's missing the point. Success isn't measured only by a bank account. Some of the wealthiest people in the world are emotionally bankrupt. Some have impressive careers, but broken character. Others have influence, but no integrity. Choose people whose values inspire you. People who keep their word. People who admit when they're wrong. People who celebrate others without jealousy. People who remain humble after success. People who stay grateful even during hardship. Character outlasts charisma. Integrity outlasts popularity. Humility outlasts talent. Those are the qualities that create relationships capable of changing your life. Have you ever watched geese flying south for the winter? They travel in a V formation. Scientists have discovered that flying together allows them to conserve energy. The birds behind benefit from the lift created by the bird in front. When the leader becomes tired, another goose moves forward to take its place. They don't compete for the front. They rotate. They support one another. They make sure no one is left behind. Imagine if people lived more like that. Imagine having friends who celebrated your progress instead of secretly resenting it. Imagine coworkers who wanted everyone on the team to succeed. Imagine family members who encouraged your dreams instead of laughing at them. Imagine a circle where everyone challenged each other to become wiser, healthier, kinder, and more disciplined. That's the kind of environment that transforms ordinary people into extraordinary ones. Because greatness is rarely built alone. Even the strongest oak tree once depended on sunlight, rain, and healthy soil. No one succeeds in complete isolation. We all need encouragement. We all need accountability. We all need people who remind us of our purpose when life becomes distracting. Here's another powerful truth. Sometimes, you are one of the 5 people influencing someone else. Someone is watching how you respond to pressure. Someone notices whether you keep your promises. Someone is learning from your attitude without you even realizing it. Maybe it's your child. Maybe it's your younger sibling. Maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it's a friend who's quietly struggling. Whether you intended it or not, you're setting an example. The question is, what kind of example are you setting? When people leave a conversation with you, do they feel more hopeful or more discouraged? Do they feel challenged to grow or tempted to settle? Do your words build people up or slowly convince them that mediocrity is enough? Influence is never neutral. Every interaction leaves something behind. A little more courage, or a little more fear, a little more faith, or a little more doubt. And the remarkable thing is that these small moments most people forget by tomorrow, often become the turning points someone remembers for the rest of their life. There is a story about 2 men who were given the exact same amount of land. The soil was similar. The weather was the same. They started on the same day. Years later, one farm was thriving with healthy crops stretching across the horizon. The other was covered in weeds. People who passed by assumed the first farmer must have been luckier. But they never saw what happened every single morning. One farmer walked his fields before sunrise. He pulled weeds while they were still small. He checked the soil. He repaired broken fences. He watered consistently. The second farmer waited. He kept saying, "I'll deal with it tomorrow." Tomorrow became next week. Next week became next month. By the time he finally decided to act, the weeds had already taken over. Relationships are surprisingly similar. Most toxic influences don't arrive looking dangerous. They start as tiny compromises. A conversation that constantly drains your energy. A friendship built entirely around gossip. A group that celebrates excuses instead of effort. You tell yourself it's not a big deal. It's only one conversation. It's only one night. It's only a joke. But life is rarely changed by one moment. It's changed by patterns. The small things repeated long enough become the big things. That's why wise people don't wait until their lives are falling apart to evaluate their circle. They pay attention early. They notice what grows after every interaction. Do they leave feeling more grateful, more disciplined, more hopeful? Or do they leave carrying frustration, doubt, and resentment? Those emotional patterns matter. Because emotions eventually become habits. And habits eventually become character. Now imagine carrying a bucket of clean water. Every day, someone adds just 1 drop of black ink. You barely notice it. The water still looks clear. Another day, another drop. Another week, another drop. Eventually, the water is no longer clean. No single drop caused the change. It was the accumulation. Negative influence often works exactly like that. You don't wake up one morning as a negative person. You become one after hearing enough negativity that it starts sounding normal. The opposite is also true. Imagine adding 1 drop of clean water to something muddy every single day. Slowly, patiently, consistently, the water begins to clear. Growth doesn't always happen with fireworks. Most of the time, it happens quietly. One encouraging conversation, one meaningful book, one honest mentor, one disciplined friend, one better decision. Day after day, that's how lives are transformed. Many people are waiting for one life-changing event, one opportunity, one breakthrough, one lucky moment. But what if your breakthrough isn't waiting for an event? What if it's waiting for a different environment? Because environments don't just shape behavior. They shape identity. Think about a young musician. If they practice alone, they'll improve. But place them in a room with musicians who are better than they are. Everything changes. Suddenly, they notice details they never noticed before. They hear rhythms they couldn't hear before. They raise their own standards without anyone forcing them to. Excellence has a way of calling excellence out of people. The same thing happens in every area of life. If you're around readers, you'll probably read more. If you're around people who exercise consistently, moving your body begins to feel normal. If you're around people who solve problems instead of complaining about them, you'll eventually begin searching for solutions too. Human beings naturally adapt to what surrounds them. So ask yourself, what am I adapting to? Am I adapting to discipline? Or procrastination? To gratitude? Or constant dissatisfaction? To courage? Or comfort? Those questions may seem simple, but your answers reveal the direction your life is heading. Here's another truth that successful people understand. Sometimes growth feels lonely before it feels rewarding. When you begin changing your habits, not everyone will celebrate. Some people will question why you've become so focused. Others may accuse you of changing, and in one sense, they're right. You are changing. You're becoming more intentional with your time, more careful with your energy, more protective of your future. Not because you think you're better than anyone else, but because you've realized your dreams deserve an environment where they can grow. Remember, a gardener doesn't apologize for pulling weeds. A gardener isn't angry at the weeds. He simply understands that if he ignores them, they'll eventually choke the life out of everything he worked so hard to plant. Your goals deserve the same level of protection. Your peace deserves the same level of protection. Your potential deserves the same level of protection. Because one day, years from now, you'll look back at the life you've built, and you'll realize it wasn't shaped only by the decisions you made. It was also shaped by the people whose voices you allowed to become part of your own. Imagine yourself 10 years from today. Not tomorrow. Not next month. 10 years. Picture yourself waking up in the morning. Where are you? How do you feel? What kind of person have you become? Now ask yourself an even more important question. Who helped shape that version of you? Because no one arrives at the future by accident. Every conversation, every friendship, every mentor, every influence, every habit, they all leave fingerprints on your life. One day you'll realize that success was never just about working harder. It was about thinking differently, living differently, choosing differently. And many of those choices were quietly influenced by the people closest to you. Think about a sculptor standing in front of a block of marble. Day after day, he removes tiny pieces. Visitors walk by and see almost no change. It still looks like a block of stone. Weeks pass. Still nothing impressive. Months pass. The work continues. Then one day, people gather around in amazement. A masterpiece stands before them. What they call an overnight success was actually the result of thousands of invisible decisions. Your life works the same way. The masterpiece isn't built in one dramatic moment. It's built every single day by the standards you accept and the company you keep. The people closest to you shape your expectations. They shape your habits. They shape your courage. They shape your character. And eventually, they help shape your destiny. The beautiful truth is this. No matter where you are today, you can begin choosing differently. You don't need to wait until Monday. You don't need to wait until next year. You don't need permission. You can start with one conversation, one book, one mentor, one encouraging friendship, one decision to spend less time where your dreams shrink and more time where they grow. Small choices become powerful when they're repeated consistently. Maybe your circle isn't perfect today. That's okay. No one's is. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is progress. Become the kind of person who seeks wisdom instead of validation. Seek people who inspire action rather than excuses. Look for those who celebrate discipline more than comfort. Spend time with people who remind you of what's possible instead of convincing you to settle for what's easy. And don't forget something equally important. Be that person for someone else. Be the friend who encourages instead of criticizes. Be the coworker who brings solutions instead of complaints. Be the family member who believes in someone's dream before anyone else does. Be the mentor you once needed. Because every encouraging word you speak may become the sentence someone remembers years later. You may never know how deeply your influence reaches. A single conversation can change a career. A single act of belief can change a family. A single example of courage can inspire generations. That's the incredible responsibility and privilege of influence. So today, before you worry about changing your entire life. Take a look at your circle. Protect your time. Protect your attention. Protect your mindset. Choose relationships that challenge you to become wiser, stronger, kinder, and more disciplined. And then make one promise to yourself. Never allow temporary comfort to steal your permanent potential. Because your future deserves more than average conversations. It deserves extraordinary ones. It deserves people who remind you that your dreams are worth fighting for. People who see your potential even when you can't see it yourself. People who refuse to let you settle for a life smaller than the one you're capable of living. Years from now, when someone asks what changed your life, it may not be one opportunity. It may not be one paycheck. It may not be one lucky break. It may simply be the day you decided to become intentional about the people you allowed to walk beside you. That decision could change everything. If this message resonated with you, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who needs this reminder today. Leave a comment about the person who has positively influenced your life. And subscribe for more motivational stories that help you grow, think bigger, and become the strongest version of yourself. Remember, the life you build tomorrow depends on the people, habits, and decisions you choose today. Choose wisely.